Welcome back to the Soapbox Business Show. I'm your host, Mario Busto, alongside
Zachary, your other host. Welcome.
All right, today, guys, we have a special guest, somebody I've been wanting to talk to since we met on a Future Pro Group networking call on AirMeet. His name is Kevin Yee. He's a digital marketer, YouTube creator, and an inbound sales strategist, owner of a boutique inbound sales advisory called Kaizen Closing, as well as an education company called Refugee Hustle, where he helps provide practical education to help entrepreneurial creators get paid doing what they love. Oh, and to top on all that, he's also an ex-pharmacist, so just like no biggie, just like humble brag. He also can just, he's a doctor, for God's sake. So let's introduce him. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Dude, what a sick intro, man. That's my first impression. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys.
Oh, of course, brother, of course. We actually met Zach on an AirMeet. I don't know if Kevin remembers that, but the vibe was so good. Like just talking to him, it was just like a refreshing convo. And I wanted to get to know more about him because he's a YouTube content creator, but I like what he says better. He's a creatorpreneur. I kind of want to like hijack that term.
I like that term.
I was wondering, is that out there? Did that already exist, or did he coin that?
I stole it from Ali Abdal, actually.
All right.
Yeah, I stole it from him.
All right, Kev, can you give us like kind of set the stage a little bit, give the audience a little background on, I know this is tough to do, but on who you are and what you're doing currently?
Yeah. So I'll give you a brief background. So as you mentioned in the intro, I used to be a pharmacist. I got really burnt out with my career. Like you think that, being a pharmacist is like the ideal like job and stuff like that. But for me, like once I got into it, I got really burnt out. I got really depressed. And it was like turning me into a person I didn't really like. So about 5 years ago, I took the leap of faith. I just I don't want to do this anymore. My dad passed away. And I was just like, I'm just going to figure this entrepreneur thing out. And prior to this, I was taking like things like copywriting courses and digital marketing courses and stuff. But the one thing that always scared the crap out of me was selling. Do you know anything about like copywriting, by the way, at all?
I think I have a generalist approach. I know when I see good copywriting, but I'm not necessarily a copywriter myself.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. My focus is more on UX writing than copywriting, but I try to not dabble in it. I hate writing myself.
I do enjoy writing, by the way. I would consider myself someone who writes, and I would consider that a strength, but I haven't ever focused on how to write good copy. I haven't really. No. So I would say no.
Well, do you know how much a 7 series email sequence would go for these days?
No idea.
It's probably like 1,000, 2,000. It's like thousands pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
My first sequence is a warm referral. My friend came up to me. He's like, dude, I really need this. I only charge $100. You know how much my client made? $130K.
Oh my God.
So that's when I realized I had a problem. And so I took a guru course, dove straight into inbound closing. Got my ass kicked so many times, but that was the start of my advisory. I started doing great work, and because of my pharmacy background, I knew I could learn really, really quick. And that's kind of how the advisory started. And then I started talking more on I had a YouTube channel during this time too, just because I love creating and it's so fun to create videos and stuff. But I was just sharing my journey, and that's how those two things kind of blew up, and it brings in so many opportunities even to this day.
So that your first run at selling something in terms of the email copywriting, that was your realization of, okay, I'm good at this because it had results, but I vastly undercharged compared to what it should have been. And that was your kind of like your pushing you into, all right, I need to learn how to sell. I need to know how to negotiate better for myself. Was that kind of how it started for you?
Yeah, because I always wanted to be like an entrepreneur, right? This is like during the Gary Vee days where he was like just coming out and the clouds in the dirt and all the Gary Vee sayings, right?
Oh, yeah, I love Gary Vee.
And then I was like, oh man, I'm not going to be a Gary Vee if I can. If I'm selling this product for $100, I can barely live on this.
I get that, man. I mean, there's two sides of the coin, right? Where when I started as a video production company, I started as a creative agency, and that still exists, but as I pivoted more towards focusing on video,
Mm.
there were projects that I charged so little that I look back on those invoices and I'm like, I can't even compare these invoices. I can't even use this as a barometer to where I can charge today, because I would literally be in the red if I went here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But the lesson is so valuable. The experience and the connections made sometimes are so valuable that it's like you need to have those bumps on the road to get to where you are now. I wanted to dive a little bit into your decision to quit pharmacy and to pursue a career as let's say, I would say that you don't just do one thing. I think you're strong in a lot of areas just based off of the little I know about you. But what really drove that decision? Because you just said now you always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I always associated pharmacy, and I've heard you say this too, with people go into it, it's a secure career, although some of your videos would say otherwise. I was watching yesterday.
Controversial take, yeah.
Controversial. I love the titles on your videos, man.
Yeah.
But can you take us a little bit behind like the mindset of why you decided to quit?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like for me, like, you know how most people are like, I want to become a doctor when I grow up, or like, I want to become like
Mhm.
a lawyer or whatever, right? I don't think people say lawyer actually, but it's interesting, right? People said that, but for me, I've always wanted to be a pharmacist. And I don't know why. I just felt that inkling. And so throughout high school and in college, that was my core focus. But then during my last year of pharmacy school, so I was about like 24. It was the last semester. The hardest part of pharmacy school was already done. And I just wanted to quit. I was so close to just dropping out. And I remember going to my advisor and I was just like, I feel like every single time I'm at the pharmacy, I'm like in a prison.
Hmm.
And then, people will say like, hey, have you tried other routes of pharmacy? We go through something called rotations, but while some rotations were really, really cool, it just didn't feel right. But then like I took the advice that most people say, they're just like, just go through it, just try it out. And I did try it out for like 5 years. And during that time, it just felt like I've been reading this book called The Catalyst, right? It talks about the 3 human needs, recommended by my really good friend George Bryant. But he in the book it says we have 3 needs: the need to be understood, the need to be consistent with our values, and then the third one is the need for autonomy to make our own decisions. And I felt like I was dying. I cannot tell you, like I started developing health problems. I was really good at what I did. I was always on top of the leaderboard and stuff like that. I learned how to do cold calls actually through the pharmacy, believe it or not. It's really, really interesting. But I just felt so burnt out. And then on the way to work, because I drove like almost 120 miles per day. It was crazy.
You were in LA at the time, right?
Yeah. And the only way to like get a and I was living in a YouTuber house. And I was like, oh dude, this is what I really want to do, right? But then my job, like it's really hard. It was very saturated for pharmacy. It was like 60 miles away one way. So 120 on the way there, I would like listen to like Tony Robbins, Gary Vee. I started amassing this like book collection because I didn't want to stay in LA traffic. It wastes 4 hours of my day, right? So I'd read books. And then that sparked like the entrepreneur side. But I was always too scared to just like quit and transition or something. There's something holding me back. And this is where the neuroscience and beliefs, we can talk about that later. But I felt like I almost didn't deserve to be like an entrepreneur or something like that. I felt like there was some limiting belief there. And then it wasn't until my 5th year of pharmacy where like, man, all this stuff happened like last minute. It was crazy. So like my employer found my YouTube channel. They terminated me because of my YouTube channel.
Wow.
That's why
insane.
if you ever see the hot takes, That's why I did it, because I was like, dude, I was so PC before. I didn't like
Mhm.
I didn't like do anything crazy. I was like, okay, now I'm going to say everything that's on my mind. So that's why you see those controversial takes on pharmacy, because honestly, like these are the conversations that happen behind the scenes that no one sees.
Mhm.
But that happened that same week. Literally that same week, my dad gets admitted to a hospital, and he had this like heart failure. And I get the call. He's like, "Hey, Kevin, you need to come back home like right now. Like, drop whatever you're doing and fly back."
Hmm.
And I see my dad. I have a conversation. He's going through surgery. We don't know that that was my last conversation.
Yeah.
But I told him everything that was happening. And my dad, very like avoidant. He wasn't very supportive for most of my life. But I remember the conversation we had, and one of the things he said was like, "Kevin, don't worry, like we'll just figure it out as a family and stuff." And I told him like, what were some of your biggest regrets? And to be honest, I don't really remember what he said, but I remember his like the look on his face and the emotional connection I had with him. And I was like, I don't want to be like him. I'm still very, very young. I can take risks. I can make that decision. And then I told dad about like, I just want to quit pharmacy. He was like, go do it. And that was like, that was the moment. Yeah, that was the moment.
Got it.
That's big, man. It sounds almost like I relate in some ways to what you're saying there, because it felt like you already knew in your final year in pharmacy school that you already getting the inkling that this maybe wasn't for you, but you needed that 5 years, whatever period of time that was, to kind of wrap your head around, okay, how am I going to make this happen? When I do make the jump, what am I going to do? Did you know that it was going to start with YouTube? What did you know immediately what you wanted to jump out and do first? Or did that come kind of later down the line?
It's really interesting. So if you take any program or anything like that, they'll always tell you like niche down and stuff. Dude, it's so hard for me to do that. I only established my niche like last year.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. But more so on the side of clients. They say like niche down to you do work for one specific client.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is so difficult to do.
It's so difficult. And especially for someone like me, I can like learn so many skills. If you ask me about copyright, I can talk about it. And you might think I'm actual copywriter, but I'm not like deep in the weeds into it. Right.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of it was kind of like dating for me. Like I'm part of the 2006 generation where YouTube just came out. I used to watch all these. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. We used to do, that's how I started. That's how I got into film, man. We used to do short comedy sketches on YouTube. And I was like, I saw it immediately with YouTube. I was like, this is it. And it was just, I mean, we grew up with it. That's when, if you posted anything, it would go off for something,
And there was cat videos.
There was a few, because I used to love like F&D films.
Yeah.
I liked a lot of like the comedy groups. There was I'm trying to think of the big ones right now, but I'm blanking on them right now.
Yeah, I really miss those days, honestly, like those OG YouTube days. But for me, like I went throughout pharmacy school regretting that, man, I want to start a YouTube channel, but I don't have the equipment. I go through the beginner objections, right? And then so I just started trying things, but I don't know, YouTube has always been that thing where it just felt right. I can't put my finger on it, but creating video content is just like right to me. It's easier than actually doing what you guys do right now, like shooting a podcast. I'm like, I can't tell you how many times I want to shoot a podcast, but I'm like, oh my God, it's so like I have to figure out all this sort of stuff. It's easier for me to do a Chris Do breakdown of his sales process in like 10 minutes and make it super high quality and stuff. I don't know. I'm just weird like that.
You're a creator, man. You got to create. And I went to business school. I have a degree in marketing, and but I knew before then that what I wanted to do was production. Did you find, because when you talk about your experience in pharmacy school, you said that you felt like you were almost like in a cage, like your freedom was being restricted when you were there. I found that when I was in business school, it almost felt like creativity was being choked out of the room, because all of the people I was surrounded by were all business business minded, more numbers related, and I'm here coming in as I feel like right at smack in the middle. You know, I lean more creative, but I'm very business centric and business minded as well. But I found like the amount of people I was surrounded with that were only focused on business, that I was like, oh my God, I'm dying in this room right now. Like I can't. This is just. We have nothing. We don't think the same. Like they do not relate to the desires I have to go in this direction here. I'm assuming that's kind of how you felt too. Like that was maybe playing a role in wanting to make that jump, or trying to figure out, okay, how can I get to where I can feel fulfilled in what I'm doing?
No, it's so crazy. I'd be at my company. I would always have the top numbers for like sales numbers, metrics, like most adherent patients, right? Because I was building a relationship, and I would do it in really innovative ways. And they would be like, how the hell did you do this, Kevin? I'm just like, I don't know. I just get an idea. I just do it. But then they would always like critique me for like being out of the box, blah, blah, blah. There was zero innovation. It just choked the life out of me. And it's just really, really funny. And even with my current business partner, right? Love the guy. We have the same values, but he is like a consultant, EY, was almost a partner, right? But he had health issues, had to quit 1 year before. But he's very like logic minded and very business like focused, which balances us out. Actually, it's a really, really good thing. But when he like the other day, we actually had a conversation about our agency, and he was like, man, I pitched this like irresistible offer, but there's all these objections and all this sort of stuff, right? I'm like, he's missing the point. He needs the reason why they don't trust us. The reason why he's getting all these objections is because they don't trust us. I could promise you tomorrow, Mario, that like I'll make you $1 million by tomorrow. But do you trust that I'll actually deliver that irresistible offer?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of YouTube. That's the beauty of content, because it builds a parasocial relationship, right? And like I was teaching my students yesterday, and I was just talking about how trust opens up the opportunity. Trust opens up the opportunity. Irresistible offers close the deal. They help reduce the friction on that. It's beautiful.
I think it creates also like this social proof too, you know, of your content, because though your employer was so like antiquated in the way they were thinking of letting you go for that, I think nowadays there's such a strength in empowering an employee to pursue something like that, because that's an employee empowerment thing, right? You're personally branding yourself as a knowledgeable, a trusted source on the topics you're talking about, just by the putting out the content. Even if you know a ton or you don't, like automatically you become kind of like this source of, he knows what he's talking about and he's interested in these topics. Obviously other people can suss out how much you know, but it's the benefits so outweigh the cons.
It's kind of funny. Like I think about like that happened in 2018, and content is like praised these days, right? Everybody's talking about content. Sometimes I wonder if I would have gotten fired like in this day and age, you know?
You have a mission that says you want to give practical education to help creators get paid doing what they love. What led you to shaping that, and how is that really shaping your all-around efforts? Because I kind of see everything you're doing as centralized around that goal.
You know what's really interesting about like vision and mission and all these things? No one tells you that it takes because we all want to wake up and be like, I know what my vision or mission is today. But it's like such a long journey for me. And I've been like, that's probably one of my weakest parts, is like being more focused and having that vision and mission. So it happened just through like reading a lot of branding books, being around like people like Christo. And then most recently, I just met Vanessa Lau in real life. And that's someone who I really respect. She always like, she's a really great strategist, and she's like so focused on that.
I'm not familiar with Vanessa. Can you give like for those who may not know who she is?
So Vanessa is she's a YouTuber. She also is on Instagram a lot. She's known for her YouTube hacks, IG hacks, and stuff like that. But she just has such a diehard like following. It's crazy. So that's the short blurb on her. But yeah, I went to her mastermind, and then I was meeting the people there, and a lot of the people were just giving out everything for free. And I don't know if it was like I was watching Andrew Huberman at the time too, and I was like, you know what? The problem with the world I'm in, inbound sales, is that everybody thinks it's sleazy. Everybody is trying to pitch you something, and it's like, even when they say they're not trying to pitch you anything, they're still trying to jam it down your throat.
Yeah.
And so I was like, the thing that's always been really, really important to me is like education, right? Like I was telling Helen, our mutual friend, like how I found these values. I was just looking through old photos and just trying to see the common themes throughout my life. So my childhood photos, and it's like education, creativity, and relationships, right? And so education was one of those main values, right, for me. And I was like, why not just make everything zero cost? And ever since then, damn, like it's crazy. I've been getting crazy opt-ins. Even my videos don't get as many views these days, but they go deep. And anyone that goes into my ecosystem, they're just like, holy shit, Kevin, give us this out for free. Because I know that education is great, but it's not going to be everything. There's just so much nuance that you need to implement. So that's kind of like the vision of it. And it really got validated even within the last month or two.
I admire your approach to sales, and you mentioned that you incorporate the soft skills of healthcare into the entrepreneurial world. Can you elaborate a bit more on what you call a personalized professional neuroscience-based approach? And I would call it something else, but I'm wondering, because we had a very similar approach to how we deal with clients, and I love it. So I kind of want to leave you to elaborate on it.
Yeah. So anybody that like has been my client or has been my student for coaching engagements, they always know, like I always share stories of my failed dating relationships, or share like stories of my like friendships that didn't go too well. Because I think we can learn a lot from the extremes like of things, right? Like I think about my friendships that like no matter what I do, there's like unconditional love there. There's no way I can like fuck this up.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you do something drastic. But
there's some ways, I guess. Yeah.
Like the John Wick on your family and Kill Bill. Like but there's that side. And then there's the other side where it feels like I'm walking on eggshells. Right. And I think there's a lot that we can learn. And when I was like learning sales, like when I jumped on my first sales floor, I was taught all the things, like traditional things: assume the sale, set the frame, like blast them, pitch them, all that. Don't talk about money until the very end. All these traditional things. But I always thought it was very weird. Like intuitively, like my gut was like, oh, I don't want to do this crap. I would like, and I was like, and then one day I just got burnt out from it. I was just like, screw it. I'm just going to just have a conversation. I know the basic structure of sales. I'm just going to talk to them like a really, really good friend. And all of a sudden I started magically closing deals. I started beating out people that were like 15 years in the industry. Wow. And the more that I got rid of the traditional like high pressure tactics, the better things flowed. But I didn't know what I was doing at the time. Right. It was kind of beautiful. And then as I learned the neuroscience, I learned that the neuroscience actually supports what I was doing with the relationship based way approach.
So it was intuition based, and then you backed it up like, okay, this is why this works. That makes sense. I remember early on in my career, I would, you play the comparison game. I think it's natural, right? You see someone who's really good at what they do, and you're like, I'm not as good as that person at that. At least at this current stage, they have like 10 years on me or whatever. Or even someone maybe who's more of a peer. And I remember thinking to myself as I got started, I was like, well, why are things working out? Like, why am I getting this opportunity? And so, things, I've got to be doing something right. And I realized soft skills, the communication, there's an aspect of the creative process that a lot of people don't work on, or at least as a creative business, is that communication with the client care, just trying to make their job easier, understanding that, a critique is not a reflection on your identity. It's, they are paying you to do a job, and I've really never had too much of an issue in that department. Critique I may disagree with a critique or with an edit, but at the end of the day, if they're writing the check, if it's my project, I get to do what I want, but they're the client. And so I always understood that communication aspect. And I was like, oh, that's my strength right now. That's one of my strengths. And that's one of the things taking it.
Yeah, there's this intuition I have about you, Mario, where it's like you're really good with people. You're really good with communication. I don't know. It's something about sometimes you can just tell.
Thank you, man.
It might be their pacing, the way that they talk, or the questions that you ask. You ask really great questions, by the way. I've been on a lot of podcasts, and you do your research. I'm like, oh shoot, did I say that? Did I say that?
Thank you, man. Thank you, Zach. I told you I'm good at asking questions. You always say I'm not.
I never told you you're not good at asking questions.
I gotta give Zach shit from time to time, just mess around.
Yeah.
That's my way of deflecting compliments.
Just push it.
It's just humor, but I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
You're gonna get. There's some other questions that you might be like, wow. I can't believe we're talking about that. But one of them I'm actually going to go to right now because we relate in some aspect. Your name of your company is Refugee Hustle. Yeah. And you mentioned that your grandmother inspired you in terms of the spirit behind that anything is possible. You can talk more about her experience, but I can talk a little bit about mine. Yeah. My grandparents came from Cuba. All of their property, everything was seized by the government I got this fly flying around my face right now. But their property was all seized by the government and they had to come over here. Language barrier. I mean, my mom had a gold chain. She was 2 or 3 years old, ripped off her neck by a military official before they got on the plane to come over to America. And in many ways, they kind of laid the foundation for me to pursue what I'm doing today, to be able to take the risks that I'm doing today, those sorts of things. What kind of role is seeing your family's sacrifice kind of playing into it? Because I can see it in your mission and you talk about it, but I'm interested to hear that from you.
Man, well, first of all, Mario, thanks for sharing that story. And I think one of the things that kind of resonates with me about your family story is how it was during that communist era, right? Of and it was happening all over the world. And even in China, there was the Cultural Revolution, right? There was World War II with the Japanese, and then there's the Cultural Revolution where my mom left and my grandma left, I think, during World War II and stuff. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of those stories of hardship and those when we talk about oppression, that's what I think about oppression. It's like having a gun to your face and being forced to accept these ideals. And I feel like a lot of times, this day and generation, maybe we forgot about that. Maybe we forgot about those stories. And there's something so visceral about those stories where it's they're going through such a hard time. So for example, my grandmother, right? During World War II, if you ever Google the rape of Nanking, that's pretty much what was happening, not only in Nanking, but all in China.
Wow.
And so that's the Japanese invasion. And actually, it's funny, if you ever get a chance to talk to Chinese grandmas, even Korean grandmas or anything like that, they still hold a grudge against it if any of them are still alive to this day, right?
It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm a TV buff and film and TV buff. There was a show that came out on Apple TV, and I was pretty much unaware of the Korean-Japanese dynamic. It's called Pachinko on Apple TV, and it's about this Korean family, and it goes generational. It goes 3 generations. It's telling 3 different stories, but combining them all at once to connect it. And it shows how Koreans, when they migrated or immigrated to Japan, and how there was a dynamic where they were treated as second-class citizens by the Japanese up until, it goes to the 80s, and I'm sure there's still undercurrents of that sort of thing, but I was so unaware of it, and it resonated so much with, not so much I don't feel like Cubans have been treated as second class citizens in America. I think we've been welcomed very much. I think Americans have this thing where, at least maybe we've forgotten these stories before, like these current day, but it feels like we embrace people who are running away from oppression and that are coming to try to seek the American dream, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But sorry, continue. Kind of.
No. Like, you're talking about the American dream, and that's actually what I want to talk about. Where it's like, you escape this. Like, my grandmother, she escaped like the Japanese invasion and stuff during the Japanese invasion. Came to America. My grandfather, he actually was fighting in World War II, American side.
Wow.
Apparently my grandfather's side is like 4th generation Chinese.
Wow.
Fighting against the fascists, the actual fascists in like Italy during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently there was some like gas warfare or something like that, and he actually came back, developed a thyroid cancer, and died, leaving my grandma like with 5 kids by herself. And like, somehow she's figured it out. Like, it wasn't easy, but she figured something out. And just like your family, she really laid the foundation where I can take more risks today. It's one of the reasons why I could become a pharmacist.
Mm-hmm.
And just that story is just like so inspirational, because she just figured things out. She didn't know. It's kind of interesting. You come to a country not knowing the language, not knowing anything about, like, you just hear this place, America, right? And you're just like, screw it, let's just go. But it's like, it's probably better than here.
Uh-huh.
Dude, how many people today would ever make that leap? I don't know. I don't know if I would make that leap personally.
I guess it depends. I mean, we see it every day. We see people throwing themselves into rivers, putting themselves in little boats. When you see some of these boats that wash up from Haiti, because I'm in Miami, but when you see some of these boats that come across, you're like, how desperate do you need to be to put yourself on this rickety boat with 30 or 40 people and to get over here? We can't fathom it. And I think that's the reason we take things, like in America, we take things for granted. And sometimes we need a reminder, of, hey, we have it good. This is the reason we have it good.
Yeah.
We can't forget the history though. Otherwise we'll go back to it, or we'll fall to it,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was walking the other day, and I have absolutely no idea why the thought crossed my mind, but I'm just like, if I grew up in another country, didn't speak English, I was really wondering, like, would I be like, yeah, let me just go to this random place over there that I don't know too much about. I agree. I probably wouldn't, honestly. It seems like such a major step, but
it's crazy.
It's really, really crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'll finish off with this last point. It's like, the reason why I named it Refugee Hustle is like, we can take that same ethos and apply it to our vision, apply it to the things that we really care about. And for me, it was like, I want a life to be like a creator. I want a life to like be an entrepreneur, so I can set up generational wealth for my kids and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the vision I want. So, R.I.P. Grandma.
Now, let's pivot a little bit.
Sure.
We go into, there's so much we can talk about here, but you mentioned prioritizing high income skills, and obviously part of that led you to inbound selling. You're passionate about inbound selling. Can you define though, what does that mean? What's the difference between a job and a skill? Clarify that. And then for those who may not know, what is high ticket closing or selling?
You know what's funny? I was doing my 2022 reflection, and I was trying to do hot takes. Like, what are the most contrarian like views I have? And actually, I changed that one. I didn't update. I should probably update it, but I came up with it like 3 days ago. Because it came out during a podcast actually, where it's like, I used to say, so your parents will always tell you, like, seek out a high paying job. That's why I did pharmacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your gurus online will tell you to pursue a high ticket skill. But something I discovered just through experience is like, that's great and all, but you're chasing the ends to meet. You're chasing the lagging metric. The thing that we should really prioritize is seeking high value experiences, and everything else will come. I think about like all the growth that I've had, and it's like I got to meet really cool people because I put myself in experiences. I prioritize learning over like the money and stuff, because you're not gonna. I think sometimes society is like kind of weird. It's like everything's supposed to be linear. I'm supposed to wake up and in a new Bugatti and stuff like that, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Where's my Camry? It's Bugatti's here. All right.
Yeah. And so when I think about like throwing myself out of pharmacy, or my experience in pharmacy, my experience out of pharmacy, and my experience like starting this advisory, that's where I had the most growth, where I obtained the skills, the experiences, and the people, and all that sort of stuff. And most of all, I have memories, and I kind of can look back on them, and it's like pretty cool. And like you talked about high ticket closing. It's there's a few things here. It's known as high ticket closing, inbound closing, like a lot of different things, high ticket sales, all that. Regardless, it's all the same thing. It's inbound sales. And so like it's when people just like book appointments with you, they set up a time with you, and then you just have a sales conversation.
And so you're doing that for companies on a contract basis, obviously, because you're not doing that on a salary basis, right? So a company will bring you in who has an inbound sales focus, and they'll hire Kaizen Closing to handle any inbound inquiries coming in.
Yeah. So when I first started, I was the one doing all the work. I was closing. I was doing all that. But over time, as I was doing better and better work, I was like, okay, so something that people may not know, dude, sales calls drain the crap out of me. They really drain me a lot. If you're doing a good job and you're listening and you're trying to tactically empathize, it's like, oh God, like I just feel like the life being sucked out of me. So I have to be very strategic when I do sales calls and when I don't. And so that's when I started building out like a team, but an agency. And then I was just like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. I have to manage people, and that takes a lot of things out of me. And so then I moved on to strategy, which is my favorite. And it's the most impactful because you make a few tweaks, and then like in their sales conversations, you lower the pressure, you add certain questions, you take out certain questions, and you'll see the conversion just fly through the roof. It's really, really amazing.
So for strategy, are you creating an entire inbound strategy for them, or seeing what they're already doing and then tweaking it, or maybe both? It's
a mix of both. Because like one of my consultant friends, my partner for the agent for the lead generation agency that I'm a partner of, one of the lessons he taught me was like, you don't go in guns blazing, right? Like that's how you get the most resistance. In the Catalyst, they talk about reactance, right? When you push hard, people are going to push back. It's like, Mario, you don't want to buy? Here's 10 more reasons why you should buy. And then it becomes this fight dynamic, which from a neuroscience point of view, it triggers that survival state, triggers self-preservation, turns off empathy. It's like, that's kind of weird. Don't you want those things on? Right? Like, yeah. So it's just really, really interesting.
I tend to take a long approach when it comes to sale. I mean, I just try to be a trusted source. You know, you may not hire every service that we do, but know it's there, and we're not trying to just get you for every single dollar you have. We want to provide value. I always operate in that. I've turned down certain clients simply because I say you shouldn't focus on video right now. Like, you just started, you just launched your business. Right now is not the time to spend X amount on a video. Right now, you got to get this in order. I'm here whenever you want, but I find that more effective because that's what I would want somebody to do for me. You know, to tell me, hey, you know, your ducks, you got to get them in a row. I'm always here. You call me whenever. But, you know, I could easily say, hey, you want to pay me that check and we'll do the video? Fantastic. But it's not going to perform the way you want it to if you don't have these other things in order.
Yeah, I think it builds trust, right? Like you're showing that you're keeping them in mind, right? Like you've got their best interest in mind as well. So I do like that.
Have you guys read The Trusted Advisor at all?
No, I have not.
Mm-mm.
You guys will like this because, like, in The Trusted Advisor, it's on my top shelf somewhere, but it has this formula called the Trusted Advisor formula.
Mhm.
And there's a few elements of it, like credibility, intimacy, all that. But the most important one, it's at the very bottom. It's the bottom quotient.
Yeah.
It talks about self-orientation.
Hmm.
And that, in my opinion, that's the most important one. Because, like, you'll read stories on, like, literally, I found stories on Reddit where people, like, shot themselves out of a commission, right? But the clients still try to find a way how to help them and make sure that they hit their commission quota or something like that. And that's how you build trust. I'm like, when I'm just like, if I was you, Mario, I was like, yeah, you shouldn't focus on video right now. That goes against your kind of like self-interest almost.
Mm-hmm.
And that builds such a level of trust. And that's the beauty thing about the neuroscience behind that too. It activates our prefrontal cortex, where it's collaboration, empathy, creative thinking, long-term thinking. And now we can build this bond. So that's why I focus on relationship based, because, like, when you focus on the relationships, the neuroscience says it activates like our highest self, where we can actually like critically think and all that.
Let's dive into the neuroscience a bit. Zach, do you have any questions on books? Because I know you had a bunch of.
Well, I do, but before I ask anything about that, I was kind of curious, right? Like, so when you're pivoting to focus more on that relationship building during the sales process, do you typically see like a much longer sales cycle before a commitment, or does it stay the same, or potentially even reduce that time to close?
That's a good question.
Thanks.
For me, so it's kind of funny. So I went through these transitions of like, so when I first started sales, my conversations were so inefficient. They would take like 2-3 hours long. I talked to old salespeople like, yeah, we stay on the phone for 2 to 3 hours just battling objections, right? But then I started getting better, and I started it started getting shorter. And I think these days my sales cycles are pretty short. Like my call durations are pretty short because I try to focus it all upstream versus downstream, handling objections and all that. I want to bring everything up front first. So I do my best to focus on that. And then sometimes we might need to hop on a second call. Usually, like, I actually prefer hopping on a separate call because I want them in their like executive state. I don't want them in a survival state making a decision, because something that Chris Do always talks about is like avoiding relationships based out of resentment. And that's the one thing I don't want. That's why people try refund, charge back and all that, because you're driving them, you're manipulating them toward a decision. And that might not be the best for them. And they're the ones that have to, it's like, if it doesn't work out, who pays the consequences? Me or the client? The client does. So yeah, I like to draw my calls out to at least 2 calls minimum. But yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
I'd like to, there's a couple of things I want to talk about here, but one kind of ties in with the other. I've been told specifically, Kevin knows a ton about how to activate flow in your brain and why we get into survival mode.
Who told you that?
I'm gonna keep the source anonymous, Helen. But there's a balance that you need to hit between working hard, hustling, and then thinking and strategizing. And you mentioned how last year in 2022 you accomplished the most by doing nothing at times. I can relate to that, where when I was in college and even now, when I would study, I'd be reading chapters just to kind of like get prepared for an exam. Sometimes the best thing I could do was just to drive around for an hour and do nothing and just reflect, ask myself questions, kind of talk out loud. And that was like a way of kind of strategizing, coming up with ideas to remember things. In business, in running a business and trying to succeed and stay in business, I'm harsh on myself. If I'm not working myself to the bone, like I have this just unnecessary amount of harshness when it comes to, if I'm not working every hour from 9 to 5 and even after hours, I'm not doing enough. It's almost like, how do you shut it off? But then I also very much value and know I might work 30 minutes in a day, but I spent a lot of time doing nothing, or what we call nothing is more like if I hit the gym, or if I go for a walk or go for a run, or anything that just requires, you're always thinking and always strategizing. That's the way we are. And you come up with an idea that's worth more than 40 hours of just grinding work or staring at your computer. How do you balance that? And how does that tie into the survival mode aspect of the brain as a business owner?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So when we talk about survival for a second, how do we respond to survival? We might see a threat. Back in the OG days, we see a tiger. I'm not sure if you see a tiger in Cuba, but you see a tiger.
See something. I don't know if it's a tiger, but
you see a tiger, and then how do we respond? Oh, it's a fight, flight, or freeze response, right? For example, in sales, when when you drop the price because you were prolonging money the whole time and you didn't address any of their concerns, they fight, they throw objections at you, they argue with you, they flight, they ghost you, or you freeze. I need to think about it, right? And so a lot of times when we have a certain belief by ourselves, like a certain belief or certain thoughts can trigger this response. And so like one of the things that was really difficult for me, just like you, Mario, is like I would be working 24/7. It was so bad that it started like affecting my intimate relationships, my romantic relationships, and all that. And deep down inside, I started developing this belief that I couldn't be in a romantic relationship because I didn't deserve it. And so what would I do? I'd fight harder. So working. And I think like working is like hustling, learning to hustle is a really great skill. I think all young people need to endure that for a point. But how old are you, Mario? I never asked.
I'm 30.
You're 30. Okay. So like around 30 years old, I was like, dude, this isn't sustainable anymore. I can't do this, right? I'm having health problems. There's so many things going on. And we have to realize like survival isn't bad, but it's not meant for long duration. The reason why I was getting all this, like because I was having the adrenaline dump, I was having the cortisol release from the stress I was going through, which increases your insulin, and you get diabetes from that. You can get type 2 diabetes from that. Or sorry, it increases your blood sugar.
Yeah.
Which increases your blood pressure. All that. There's a whole physiological cascade.
Yeah.
And that's something we don't realize. And like during that time, it's like our survival is like self-preservation. We're only focused on ourselves. We're not like taking the time to listen. Have you ever been in an argument before and you're just like, you're going back and forth? It feels like a world star hip hop like fight, and be like, wait, let me just take the time to understand. No one's ever like that in a world star hip hop fight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's what kind of de-escalation is. It's a transition into the executive state where your prefrontal cortex turns on. Have you ever heard that quote about like, you only use like 30% of your brain at a time? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard it.
That's because we're in survival. I don't know the exact percentage, but like our prefrontal cortex is a large mass in our brain. And that's responsible for, like I said, the creativity, the empathy, understanding, and especially in our work, right? We want that creative thinking. We want that long-term thinking. And if we can learn to access it a lot more, then we get better ideas. We can find those ideas that 30-minute idea that compensates for the next year. And even great business strategists, there's a really great book I'm reading right now that was recommended by Vanessa and George Bryant. It's called The Road Less Stupid.
I like that.
The Road Less Stupid. It's really crafty. So I'll give a quick blurb about it, like 2-sentence blurb. Basically, the theory is smart people do dumb things. How do you reduce the dumb things that you do? is through thinking time. And through thinking time, you ask yourself better questions. Have you ever had those, like, even on sales calls, right? You ask a question and you're like, oh my God, I never thought about that before. That's turning on the executive state. It's really, really interesting. And the better that you can ask questions, there's a few ways that you can manipulate this, right? You can kind of do gratitude exercises, right? So I usually do a gratitude exercise before a big performance.
I was going to ask you, how do you combat the survival state or mindset?
Yeah. If I'm really nervous on a sales call and I'm like talking like this really, really fast, I'll slow down. I control my breathing. I do like a modified box breathing. I do a longer exhale, like 8 seconds exhale. I do 4-4-8-4 throughout my presentation. And then I try to ask myself better questions too, right? Have you ever noticed, like Chris Voss always talks about this? Have you ever read Never Split the Difference?
Oh, you're entering Zach's territory here.
I love that book.
Yeah. So what does Chris Voss say about why questions?
It's been a while since I've read that book.
I'll jog your memory then.
Do it.
I mean, yeah. As you remember, Zach.
I remember it's somewhere in my brain.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Like all that whole book is all about how to activate someone's executive state. If you think about it, labeling someone's emotions. Hey, Zach, it seems like there's a bit of hesitation. You're labeling the emotion. They're forced to think about how they're feeling. It turns on the executive state. When I ask a why question, like unstrategically, I'm like, Mario, why would you do that?
It's defensive immediately. Yeah.
I think about my parents. I'm like, dude.
Yeah.
Or it's like,
who are you to ask me why? Yeah.
World star hip hop, right?
Yeah.
But like when someone's in a survival mode and you ask like, oh, Mario, how are you feeling? That feels kind of weird, but that's something that you ask in like a executive state. So what's the transition? How do you transition it? Hey, what if that wasn't the case? What is the translation in between the survival to the executive state? And that's how, those are 3 ways that I usually kind of enter the executive state and shift out of the survival state. It's probably more, but that's what comes to mind.
Interesting. I love hearing the different ways of doing that. I mean, I heard a good one once. It was from Bob Goff, who he says if he's ever about to have, like he's trying not to be angry or to overreact and get into some sort of situation, he says like under the desk, he'll put both of his hands, like it's hard, usually when you're angry, you're like balled up in a fist. Like that's what we associate it with. He'll have his hands like this. And he says it is so hard to like be angry at somebody if you're like in a giving posture, like to yell at them or to get in that way. I was like, I've never thought about that.
Ooh, that's interesting. I never thought about like power poses and like all that.
He I mean, you came from probably making 6 figures and healthy 6 figures in pharmacy, and then you kick off your business, and I'm assuming it wasn't immediately 6 figures right out the gate. So you probably got into a survival mode of how am I going to pay the bills? I mean, I got a cushion here. I got what do we call it? Runaway.
Yes.
How did you get to the point now? Because you're smoothly operating now in terms of like the way you're dealing with it. But what were those struggles like as like a new business owner trying to deal with the insecurity of, hey, I'm not making as much and I don't maybe see a path on how I'm going to get to, a comfortable living again.
What's really interesting? I think from the outside, it looks like I have all my shit together. But deep down inside, I'm just like,
that's all.
Like, fuck. But when I zoom out, I look over time, right? It's like it's huge fluctuations, right? And then like now it's like I see these huge fluctuations, but trending upward, and it's like not as crazy as before.
Not as violent.
Yeah, volatile. Yes.
Yeah,
so like as a new business owner, luckily, like that's the one good thing about pharmacy. I had tons of money because of it. I was like, even when I was a pharmacist, I was making 150K per year. I was like, my friends were like, what? You're sleeping on a Japanese futon, which is like basically a mat on the ground pretty much, right? I had very little, and I've always like operated on that principle because you just, I don't know, maybe it's like from my grandma, like my grandmother's like generation and stuff too, because I was raised by her.
Mhm.
I'm not cheap on people, but like for everyday living, I like to keep it minimal,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Intentionally. So dealing with the fluctuations, I think like over time, my relationship with money has had to change, because in that world, like even in the business world too, like a lot of times we associate our self-worth with money. And when like some months when I was learning, I wouldn't make a single cent, or maybe I make $100 to AdSense on YouTube. I lied.
Yeah.
but it was like, it was really, really tough. And I had to dissociate myself from the money beliefs and stuff like that.
I've always viewed money as, I mean, sure, there are some material things I think we all want to have, like a nice house and, you know, certain things like that. But really, what I've always viewed money as is a way to get to freedom, a way to get to freedom of time, which is money. The ability to be able to take that risk that maybe a father of four cannot, you know? Hey, because there's different priorities. You get to that and it's like, all right, dreams got to go second here. Got to make sure everybody's fed. So I've always kind of had that viewpoint too, in terms of adjusting the relationship with it, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go.
You can go ahead.
Anyways, I guess that what I was trying to get at with that question was, what is that? You know, actually, let's save that question. Let's save the question for the last one, and then when we get to the rapid fire, because it's more of an encompassing your journey over the years and how you've changed as a person and evolved. But I wanted to hit you with one last practical one, and it's a controversial statement maybe, but you say something about the world doesn't need another guru. I was wondering, two parts to this. Does it have anything to do with Tony Robbins' documentary, I'm Not Your Guru, on Netflix, which you haven't watched it, you should check it out because you seem like a Tony Robbins fan.
Yeah.
And then the second part, and we agree on this. You mentioned you put on your website, you won't have to quit your job tomorrow, invest in a guru course, or go on an ayahuasca trip to South America soul searching. The missing piece is already deep inside of you. I agree so wholeheartedly with that statement. And I think we all fall into the trap or have fallen into the trap of, I have to just gain this vast amount of knowledge before I even begin, instead of failing your way towards success, which everybody has to do. You know, if however long you want to put it off.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that in terms of how do you help somebody find what's already deep within them, and how do you balance that, you know, knowledge you need to be competent, right? But at the same time, not letting it be a way that puts off what you need to do.
There's so many things that come up to mind right now. And I think like, okay, going back to the guru thing, Tony Robbins, I did watch that, but wasn't inspired by that.
Yeah.
It was actually inspired by like seeing the rise of all these like fake guru channels and stuff. I don't really like those channels, to be honest with you. I don't consume them. But I noticed this like type of thing of like the whole guru thing. And I've been in like guru programs before, right? The aggressive, and if you don't know what a guru is, like for listeners, it's like a aggressive online marketer, right? And what are they doing? They're triggering survival. If we think about it, money is a modern day survival. You said earlier, sometimes you got to reprioritize things, kids got to eat, all this. But that's why it like things like money trigger our survival.
Yeah, true.
Right. And there's this great book. It's called Cashvertising. Actually, there's only one concept I like in the book, where it talks about the Life Force 8 and the 9 human human wants. And these are learned, right? The human wants are learned. So for example, money is a want, but what do we really want? Oh, life extension, to be loved, relationships. It's a really, really interesting concept. But what these gurus will do sometimes, they'll trigger that survival state. and then they'll tie it to your like true human desires, the life force 8, and they manipulate that way. And then when you jump on a sales call with them, they're like, well, what do you want to do, Kevin? You clearly have a choice. If you buy now, there are all these extra incentives and stuff like that. It puts us in survival, and we're like, shit, I need to do something. And you run into something. But how do you know if that decision is actually good for us, healthy for us? Are we running into a deeper danger, right? That's why earlier in my sales process, I was always talking about, like, I'm always trying to avoid, especially as a service provider, I'm always trying to avoid relationships of resentment, right? And so, like, to go back to what you mentioned earlier, you don't need another guru. You don't need to invest in another guru course. So what do you need? You need what we talked about earlier. Friends, trusted advisors. All my trusted advisors are actually, ironically, my really great friends, right? So I think about, like, my jujitsu coach at, like, Eddie Bravo's and stuff. Really great trusted advisor. Vanessa Lau, my consultant friend, a lot more, right? We need another friend or trusted advisor. And when we're not alone, when we have people around us that actually care about us, that we're actually fostering these relationships, it turns on that executive state I was talking about earlier. And to tie it in with ayahuasca, when we do LSD, ayahuasca, any of these hallucinogenics, what does that do? We have these profound visions and stuff like that. Part of that actually turns off our amygdala, which is responsible for the fear center, like fight, flight, freeze. And what does it do? It activates our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for all the creativity that we have. And so the reason why I say you don't need an ayahuasca trip is because we can instill these practices of meditation, self-care, all these different things to activate this at will. It's really, really beautiful. Have you ever heard of people, like, doing, like, on YouTube, like, DMT release with meditation?
Yeah.
Or
this is why it works.
Or just, and it's not to say that those things aren't maybe helpful in some way to somebody, but I've seen things like 7-week silence meditation, going into the woods and not talking for, I've seen stuff like that. It seems like everybody has, like, their thing, right? Like, if you ever see the ice plunge people, and by the way, I think all of these things are positive and all have their benefits, but it's not the only thing that you need to do. Can you give some, you can obviously tell just by like listening and talking to you, you're a voracious reader.
I've been staring at the books in the background the entire time. Yeah, I'm trying to, like, what is that book?
I have 4 more bookcases, by the way. Just FYI.
I've got a couple here.
We haven't dived into it much, and we probably won't get to it in this interview about your book reviews, but what is your approach to book reading? What are some practical tips that people can apply in their own lives to not only reading a book, but like what you're doing? You're pulling such practical application and retaining. What kind of tips do you give to retain and to apply the lessons learned from books? And also, you do a good job of filtering what doesn't align with your values and what you think works, and filtering that out, but still finding a good in it.
Yeah. So, to answer your question, I'm going to quote a book. For real though, but one of the books that I really look up to is by Naval Ravikant. It's one of Christo's favorite books. The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. Ironically, it's not written by Naval Ravikant.
That's funny.
Sorry. Can you hear that, by the way?
No.
There's, like, the lawn person in the back.
Not at all.
No? Okay, good. So, yeah, Naval Ravikant is one of Vanessa's favorite books, one of Christo's favorite books. But in the book, he actually talks about reading. And if we distill reading, like, what is reading? It's like sifting through ideas. So sometimes, like, we have this idea of reading where we bring out a book, we got to sit there for hours and be like, okay, I'm done. Read it front to cover. But Naval, he argues, like, no, you should actually read several books at a time. You should flip through them. And one of the things that I've been personally doing is being a little bit more intentional about my reading.
Hmm.
So if I'm teaching a class like for my cohort, right? I'm just like, okay, so I'm talking about psychology today. What are the reasons for buying? I'll like literally search through my library physically. That's why I have physical books, because like
Yeah.
there's something so cool about
I agree.
the experience
Yeah,
of picking up a physical
100%.
book.
100%.
And I'll sift through a book and I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. I remember this idea. So I do that. I also take notes on all my books too. So I
Mhm.
use like a few apps called like Readwise, and it integrates with my Notion board and stuff like that.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's cool.
Cool.
That's next level. So
I
you're
gotta-
building out your second brain.
I use Notion, so I got to figure out how to set that up in there.
I need to take notes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's one thing I really don't do.
I
It's
don't either.
it's really cool. It integrates with everything. You can take a photo of like a certain passage. It'll keep that quote, keep the page. It will like do everything for you. So I use that. I use that personally, and I integrate it in my Notion. And then in addition to that, I use this app called Shortform, where like it has like these really in-depth book reviews. It's kind of like Blinkist, but honestly, I like it more than Blinkist because it's like there's a one pager and then there's like chapter by chapter summaries and stuff like that. And I'll just sift through the ideas. Sometimes like I want to read a book, but I don't know if it's worth it or not.
Yeah.
So then I'll just skim through it. So that's like kind of like what I do. But then most importantly, I try to apply it. So like I either try to teach it or just implement it into
I
the
love that.
business.
I love
Yeah.
that. So let's do a little story hour here. What are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? Road Less Stupid.
Road Less Stupid. Okay.
Yeah.
You're reading more than one book right now.
I am. I am. I think I posted on my Instagram recently, but I was reading.
You made me feel a lot better because if you see right there, I got about 5 or 6 books started at the same time here. But I'm not. I got to be more disciplined of allocating the time to each one.
I'm with you
Oh
on
yes.
that.
So I have the list over here. Like I have this photo of like all the books I was reading at like the casino.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So
Okay. Let me look it up.
The books I'm reading: The Road Less Stupid, How Will You Measure Your Life, How to Not Die Alone, because I don't want to be single for the rest of my life, Little
Yeah.
Book of Clarity, 10x is Easier Than 2x. Those are the books I'm reading.
Cool.
So I'm curious. I'm assuming that you're prioritizing obviously the retention of information over just quantity, right? Like it's quality instead of quantity. How many books do you typically end up reading in a given year to try and make sure that, hey, I'm retaining the information within the book versus just trying to plow through it all?
You know, I go through phases. There's sometimes where I feel like I need to read a book every single day. I've gone through those phases. Other times I'm just like, no, it's like I need to focus on like execution and implementation. So like it really varies, but I think in a given year, I don't know, I probably go through this like whole bookcase like maybe like 2 or 3 times ish. So I read quite a bit, but like
Wow.
I don't know. It's hard to quantify actually.
Okay.
Do you enjoy any fiction, or is it business centric only?
Dude, nothing will like put me to sleep than reading like Twilight or something like that. I used to read Harry Potter when I was in 5th grade, but no, like it's mostly fiction, personal development, business, psychology, a lot of psychology these days.
Okay, cool. All right, let's round out the interview here. I mean, there's way more on my list here to ask you about, but we'll save some for a future pod.
Yeah.
From the beginning of your journey till now, what does growth look like for you? How have you changed mentality wise? And you've shared so much, but what, overcoming what you've overcome, losing a parent, those are impactful things, making a career change. And I know we say you quit pharmacy, but I don't think that's the right word to use. I think you took on another challenge, because pharmacy is always there if you wanted to fall in love with it or something like that happens. But it's something else. You were called to another purpose. What does that journey look like for you to round out the interview? And then we'll go into what we call the rapid fire inside the business studio.
I can't
outro.
wait. As you're saying all that, I was like reflecting on a lot of the things that happened over these 5 years. And I actually just finished my 5-year reflection too. And I think the biggest thing over these last few years is just learning how to find my true essence, my true self. I know that sounds kind of like woo woo and stuff, but when I look at everything I do, everything from jujitsu to the business like opportunities I'm in to doing my YouTube channel, everything just feels aligned. And I feel like this is my true essence. This is what I was meant to do. And I think the thing I'm most proud of myself over these last few years and just throughout my life is being able to like learn how to strategically turn off my survival brain and just enter into my executive state. And that's why these days, like, I try to avoid as much time like staying busy and just being more intentional about things. And it's kind of interesting. You see all these like top level like entrepreneurs talk about like self-care and all this. And now I kind of finally get it because I've been on the other side of like burnout, always need to work. Like I like Asian work, like Asian work, like work ethic, like when you're in high school and all that is real. You're always in constant survival. You feel like you're not going to be like loved by your parents. You feel like you're a dishonor to your family. Like those points where I felt almost like suicidal because I was like, I'm not going to hit this grade. I'm a failure to the family. I'm a disappointment to the family. And going from that to where I am now, where it's like, you know, no matter what, Kevin, you got your own back and like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's how I came to the insight of like, don't chase high paying jobs. Don't chase high income skills. Chase high value experiences, the one that you'll forever remember and have major takeaways from.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing and being, as always, introspective and just vulnerable too, and sharing a lot of your experiences. All right. So to round out the show, I don't know if you've listened to an episode of ours before, but one of my favorite shows growing up was called Inside the Actor Studio, hosted by James Lipton, and he'd hire all the star actors in Hollywood, and he would end every show with a rapid fire that I've pretty much almost completely stolen, but I've edited a little bit. But it's essentially, you know, a Rorschach test and quick questions to get a feel for who you are.
Sure. Okay.
And we'll start it off here.
Let's go.
Kevin Yee, inside the business studio. What is your favorite word?
Authentic.
What is your least favorite word?
Manipulating.
What gets you going, motivates?
Relationships.
What puts you off?
Sleazy salespeople.
What sound or noise do you love?
808 drums on hip hop.
Nice. What sound or noise do you hate?
Crying babies on airplanes, especially.
You know, that question has become one of my favorites in this edition because everybody breaks from the serious, have to answer something serious, and then they just go to like their innate instinct. Like our last episode was my good friend Mo Kemp, who's a professional basketball player.
Yeah.
And, he goes, the knife on the plate. Like if I hear it, I gotta go. I gotta leave. I was cracking up. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, professional jiu-jitsu fighter.
Cool. What profession would you not like to do?
Ballerina.
I love it.
I'm just shooting whatever on my mind.
First thing on your mind, this is how it works, man.
Yeah.
What is a bit of advice or wisdom you wish you knew before starting your own company or your own venture?
Follow your gut.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Impact.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for joining the show. And for the audience out there, we're going to let Kevin plug all his stuff, but go check out his YouTube content. It's insightful. It's vulnerable. And just, what you heard today is what you get on that content. So Kevin, thank you again for joining. And please let us know where we can find you and how you want people to follow you.
Sure. Yeah. If you like to follow me and just build a genuine friendship, you can go refugeehustle.com/links. Has my Instagram, has everything that I do. So make it easy.
Perfect.
But-
Perfect.
Mhm.
Thank you, man. This has been a pleasure. I hope to have you on again in the future. And I definitely want to keep connecting with you. And, I think this is the beautiful thing about the Future Pro Group is that we didn't know each other before. And it's about these relationships you build. And looking forward to the future.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, Zach, you hit us with the outro here.
Well, thank you for listening to the Soapbox Business Show. You can find this podcast anywhere you find podcasts, Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcasts, or you can visit our website at soapbox.house. You'll find links out to this podcast and a few others we have on the network.